He asked why she always wore the mask. She just whispered, "'Cause you'd stop saving me." The alarm was already screaming when I pulled the first body off the stretcher. Cinder Station was on fire. Not the kind of fire you fight with a hose. The kind that moves through the walls, through the oxygen lines, through the reinforced plating that was supposed to hold for 50 years. 3 decks above me, a Sketh boarding craft had punched a hole clean through the outer hull, and the Coalition's defensive grid had done nothing. Nothing. Because half the crew was already dead and the other half was running. I was not running. I had 17 wounded in the triage bay, 2 functioning surgical clamps, a medkit that had not been restocked in 6 days, and a Veth field medic named Caro who kept saying, in that flat, calm Veth way of his, that the structural integrity of the bay was at 22% and falling. "I heard you the first time," I said. "You did not act on the information," he replied. "I'm acting on a different set of priorities." He watched me work for a moment. Then he picked up a clamp and started helping. That is the thing about Veth. They think humans are irrational right up until the moment they decide to follow us anyway. My name is Cale Morrow. I am a sergeant, combat medic, and 11-year veteran of the Interstellar Reclamation War. I have served on 4 stations, 2 colony ships, and 1 asteroid that no longer exists on any official map. I have stitched together Veth soldiers with human thread because their own sutures dissolved in the station's recycled air. I have given my blood, human blood, to a Drell fighter because no one had thought to stock compatible plasma and I happened to be a universal donor. I have been told, by 3 separate alien species, that humans are the most baffling creatures in the known galaxy. I take that as a compliment. The war had been grinding for 11 years by the time I reached Cinder Station. 11 years of fighting the Sketh Dominion, a species that did not negotiate, did not retreat, and did not take prisoners. They expanded the way a fire expands. Not because they wanted what was ahead of them, but because consuming it was simply what they did. The Coalition had formed out of desperation. 5 species, including humanity, had pooled their militaries and their resources and their pride, and even then it was a near thing. The Veth were the strategists, the Drell were the heavy fighters, the Soon provided logistics, the Orith provided intelligence, humanity provided something harder to classify. The Veth general who first integrated human units into the Coalition line said, in his official report, that humans were tactically inconsistent but strategically persistent. What he meant was that we kept showing up in places we had no business, surviving, doing things that made no tactical sense, and somehow it kept working. What he did not include in the report, but said privately to his second-in-command, was that the real difference was simpler than that. Humans did not know how to leave their people behind. It was not a rule we followed. It was not a value we had to remind ourselves of. It was something closer to a reflex. A human medic in a collapsing station does not calculate the odds of saving each patient and prioritize accordingly. A human medic in a collapsing station saves the person in front of him, then the next one, then the next one, until there is no one left to save or there is no medic left to do it. Other Cs called this irrational. I called it obvious. We got 14 out of 17 that night. The 3 we lost had been gone before the stretchers reached me. I know because I checked each one myself. Kuro and I moved the survivors to the secondary bay on Deck 4, which was still intact, and then I went back for the supply crates, because I was not going to spend the next week doing surgery with my bare hands. Karo stood in the doorway of the bay and watched me go back into the smoke without saying a word. When I came out with the crates, he took one from me without being asked. We did not speak about it. There was nothing to say. That was the night I first saw her. She came in on the last stretcher, carried by 2 Veth soldiers who looked shaken in a way I had not seen Veth soldiers look before. The Veth are not an emotional species, not in the human sense. They process things quietly, efficiently, without visible disturbance. These 2 looked disturbed. One of them would not look at what he was carrying. The other kept his eyes fixed somewhere over my shoulder, like he was staring at something only he could see. On the stretcher was a Veth soldier, female, lean, dressed in a scout's light armor that had been burned almost completely off the left side of her body. The burns were severe, deep, red-black, covering her left arm and shoulder and part of her neck. She had been close to something that went very wrong. Her vital signs, according to the small reader clipped to the stretcher frame, were poor, breathing shallow, heart rate irregular. The Veth standard triage classification, printed on the corner of the reader in their clean angular script, read, non-survivable. I looked at that word for exactly 1 second. Then I looked at her face. She was wearing a mask, not a medical mask, not an oxygen unit. A smooth, white mask, sealed flat against her face from forehead to chin with dark lenses where the eyes should have been. It had no visible seam, no clasp, no adjustment point. It fit her face the way skin fits bone, like it had always been there, like it was meant to be there. "What is this?" I asked the soldier who had carried her in. "Morning rite," he said. He said it quickly and he said it without meeting my eyes. "Is the mask sealed to her airways?" "It has its own ventilation system." "Is she breathing through it right now?" He hesitated for just a fraction of a second too long. "Yes." I had learned over 11 years that a vet who hesitates before answering a direct question is not lying. They do not lie. They simply withhold. The hesitation tells you that the truth is more complicated than the answer they have given you. And the answer they have given you is the one they are permitted to provide. I filed that away and got to work. The burns were the priority. I cleaned them, packed them, sealed the worst of the damage with synthetic skin and pressure dressings. Her left arm was going to need real surgical attention in the next 12 hours, or she would lose function in 3 of her 4 fingers. Her heart rate steadied as I worked, which told me her body was fighting back. The triage classification on the reader said non-survivable. Her body had not read the classification. I worked for 40 minutes straight. When I finally stepped back, Caro looked at the reader, then at me. "That classification was accurate when it was written," he said. "Then it was written too early," I said. He considered that for a moment. Veth triage protocol assigns non-survivable classifications at the point of wounding, based on injury severity and projected resource cost. Human triage assigns non-survivable classifications at the point of confirmed death, I said. "She is not dead. Therefore she is survivable." Caro looked at the patient, then back at me. "That is a philosophical difference, not a medical one. Good thing I'm a medic and not a philosopher." He almost smiled. Veth do not smile, not with their mouths, anyway, but there is something that happens around their eyes when they find something unexpectedly reasonable, and Caro did that thing. Then he went back to his other patients, and I stayed with her. She was still for a long time. I sat in the chair beside the cot and watched her readouts and ate half a ration bar that tasted like compressed chalk and thought about the 14 people sleeping in the recovery bay and the 3 I had not been fast enough to reach. That is the part of the job that no one talks about. Not the bodies, not the wounds, not the 11 years of watching the war eat through people I knew. The part no one talks about is the chair beside the cot, and the waiting, and the half a ration bar at 2 in the morning when the station has gone quiet, and you are alone with someone who may or may not be there when the lights come back up. She was there when the lights came back up. She was there when the medics from the day shift came in and stopped walking at the sight of her, then looked at me with expressions I recognized, not quite alarm, not quite reverence, something caught between the two. She was there when the Veth officer from command came down to the bay at 0800 ZO and stood at the foot of her cot and read the triage classification on the reader, and then read my treatment notes, and then looked at me with the carefully neutral expression that senior Veth officers use when they are deciding whether to be angry. "This soldier was classified non-survivable," he said. "She is classified in recovery," I said. I had already changed the reader, he noticed. "Sergeant Morrow, you are aware that Coalition Triage Protocol requires—" "I am aware of Coalition Triage Protocol," I said. "I am also aware that she is breathing, her heart rate has stabilized, and her burns are responding to treatment. I acted on the information available to me." He looked at me for a long time, then he looked at her, then very quietly he said, "She is important. To people who are more important than you." "Everyone is important to someone," I said. He left without responding. I sat back down in the chair. She woke at noon. I know the exact moment because I was writing up my incident report and I heard the change in her breathing. A small shift from the slow rhythm of unconscious recovery to the slightly different, slightly more deliberate rhythm of a person becoming aware of the world again. I set down the report. I leaned forward. The dark lenses of the mask turned toward me. I do not know how I knew she was looking at me and not at the ceiling or the wall or the overhead light. I just knew. There was something in the angle of it, the quality of it, that said, "You, good afternoon," I said. She was quiet for a long time. Then, through the mask's vocoder, a flat synthetic rendering of what I would later learn was a remarkably clear and careful voice. She said, "Why did you bother?" I said. "Excuse me. My injuries," she said. "They were classified non-survivable. Coalition protocol does not authorize resource expenditure on non-survivable cases. You spent 40 minutes and significant material resources on a case that was not authorized. Why?" I looked at her for a moment. "Because Veth triage is pessimistic." The dark lenses held on me. "That is not a medical reason. It is silence." Long enough that I thought she might have drifted back under. Then, "You are human. Last time I checked. I have heard things about humans." she said, about the way they behave in medical contexts. Good thing, I hope. Another pause. Unusual things, she said. I smiled. I do not think she could see it through the lenses, but I smiled anyway. Get some rest, I said. You have a surgical appointment in 3 hours and I would prefer you to be conscious for it. She did not respond, but she did not look away either. The dark lenses stayed on me while I went back to my report, and I could feel them there, steady and considering, like someone trying to work out a problem they had not expected to find interesting. I have been a medic for 11 years. I have treated hundreds of patients across 6 species. I have sat in more chairs beside more cots than I can count. But I remember that particular afternoon with a clarity I cannot fully explain. The smoke still thin in the recycled air, the station groaning faintly as it cooled, the woman in the white mask watching me from the cot as I wrote my report. I did not know then what the mask was. I did not know then what she was. I only knew that she was there, and she was awake, and she had chosen to ask me why I bothered. 11 years of war, and no one had ever asked me that. I found that I wanted to give her a proper answer. They transferred her to long-term recovery on deck 6 2 days later. I checked on her every shift, which was more than protocol required, and which Caro observed without comment. On the 3rd day, I brought her an extra ration pack from the human supply. The Veth rations were technically sufficient but tasted, by their own admission, like mineral paste, and I had long since learned that the business of healing has as much to do with small dignities as it does with wound care. She accepted it. She did not eat it in front of me. I did not ask why. On the 4th day she told me her name Eva, she said. Kale, I said. I know, she said. The day staff say it when they talk about you. They say it the way people say the name of something they do not entirely understand but have decided to trust anyway. I did not know what to do with that. I decided to take it as a compliment. How are the burns? I asked. Healing, she said. Faster than your projections, I noticed. I had noticed. The synthetic skin grafts were integrating at roughly twice the expected rate. I had updated my notes and said nothing to command, because I had learned, in 11 years, that when something about a patient does not quite fit the expected pattern, the wise move is to watch before you report. Reporting gets people scrutinized. Scrutiny sometimes helps, and sometimes it does not. Does that concern you? She asked. No, I said. People heal at different rates. That is just biology. The dark lenses watched me. Most medics, she said carefully, would find the rate unusual enough to flag. Most medics, I said, are looking for things that are wrong. I look for things that are working. She was quiet for a moment. Then very softly, that is also an unusual way to practice medicine. It keeps more people alive, I said simply. She did not answer. But when I left that afternoon I had the feeling, quiet, not urgent, but persistent, that something had shifted, that I had passed some kind of test I had not known I was taking. I did not know then what kind of test it was. I would not know for another 8 months. The war did not pause for recovery. It never did. Within a week, the station had patched its hull breach, restocked its bays, and cycled in fresh personnel from the nearest coalition supply hub. I was reassigned to field rotations. Eva was, to my moderate surprise, cleared for field duty far ahead of any reasonable timeline and assigned as a scout for my unit. When I saw her name on the assignment roster, I looked at it for a long time. Then I looked across the briefing room and found her already looking at me. She was wearing the mask. I had not seen her without it. I had not expected to. But standing here in standard scout kit with the smooth white oval of the mask framed by the dark collar of her armor, she looked less like a patient and more like something else entirely. Something precise. Something that had been designed for a purpose and was now, finally operating within it. I gave her a nod. She gave me nothing back, no nod, no gesture, no shift in posture. But the lenses tracked me as I moved to my seat. And I had learned, already in just those few days, that with Eva the tracking was the answer. The briefing officer began to speak, and the war resumed, and neither of us said a word. But something had started. I did not have a name for it yet. I would find one. The first time I saw her in combat, I stopped breathing for about 4 seconds. She moved through the broken corridor of the contested relay station on Deck 9 like she had memorized it before she arrived. Not carefully, not slowly, but with a kind of relaxed certainty that looked nothing like what I had been trained to call courage. Courage implies overcoming fear. She did not look afraid. She looked like someone reading a text she had read before, following its sentences to their logical conclusions. Left.
Right.
Down. She turned a corner 3 full seconds before the sensor sweep detected the Sketh unit waiting on the other side, and when she came back around that corner, the unit was no longer a problem. I was still processing what I had seen when she walked past me, calm and unhurried, and said, The secondary access shaft is clear. Move your people through now. The eastern approach will be contested in approximately 90 seconds. I moved my people through. 91 seconds later, the eastern approach was contested. I looked at the back of her head as we ran. How did you know? I asked. Acoustic pattern from the hull vibration, she said. The Sketh use a specific gate weight in their boarding formations. The vibration signature travels through the plating approximately 2 minutes ahead of visual contact. You can hear that? I can process it, she said. There was a difference in those 2 words that I noted and set aside for later. That was how it began. The partnership, the rhythm of it, the particular trust that forms between 2 people who have kept each other functional, in places where functionality is not guaranteed. Over the following weeks, we developed a working pattern that required very little speech. I kept her supplied and intact when the work of the field tried to take her apart. She kept me and my people alive through methods I could not fully explain and stopped trying to question. It was efficient. It was, in the quiet professional way of people who work closely in difficult conditions, comfortable. And then it became something more than comfortable. I cannot tell you the exact moment it happened. I can tell you that it was not a single moment. It was a slow accumulation, like water wearing a channel through rock. It was the way she asked questions about Earth, not casually, not as small talk, but with a focused, genuine interest that made me feel, every time, that I was explaining something that mattered. It was the way she listened. Most people listen to the words. Ava listened to everything around the words. The pauses, the way I chose one phrase over another, the small hesitations that even I had not noticed I was making. It was the night on the observation deck when she asked me why humans grieve. We had lost 2 people from the unit that day. Good soldiers. I had known one of them for 3 years. I had not been able to do anything. The wounds were beyond what I had on hand, beyond what I could have had on hand, and I had known it when I knelt beside him, and I had kept working anyway because that is what I do. But that night I was sitting on the observation deck with my back against the cold wall, watching the gas giant Emirak turn below us in shades of amber and violet, and I was not quite all right. Ava sat down beside me. She did not ask if I minded. She simply sat, at a distance that was close but not intrusive, and looked out at the planet. After a long time, she said, "The grieving, what does it do?" I thought about it. "It reminds you that the person was real," I said, "that they mattered. If you didn't grieve, you might start to forget that." She was quiet. "Is forgetting so bad?" "For some things," I said. "Yeah, it is." She looked at the planet. "Veth do not grieve the way you do. We acknowledge loss, we process it, we move forward efficiently. Do you miss anyone?" I asked. A very long pause. "I do not know," she said finally. "I am not sure I have the right equipment for it." I looked at her profile, the clean line of the mask, the still set of her shoulders. "I think you might," I said. She did not answer. But she also did not move away. We sat there in silence for a long time, and the gas giant turned, and somewhere deep in the station and the damage control teams were working, and neither of us spoke. And it was not uncomfortable at all. That was the moment, or one of them, one of the drops that wore the channel. I began to notice things I had not let myself notice before. The way she stood slightly closer to me than she stood to anyone else. The way she always knew where I was in a room without looking. The way she had, quietly and without announcement, started covering my back in situations where no one had asked her to, putting herself between me and angles I had not fully assessed, without making it a point, without drawing attention to it, like it was simply the logical distribution of available protection. I noticed all of it. And then I began to notice the other things, the things I had been explaining to myself and then gradually stopping explaining. She did not eat, not once. I had worked beside her through 3 weeks of field rotations, and I had never seen her consume a single ration. I told myself she ate during off hours. I stopped telling myself that in the second week, she did not sleep. I'd worked irregular shifts my whole career, and I knew the schedules of the people around me the way a sailor knows tides. Ava had no schedule. She was simply always functional, always present, always. Awake is not the right word. Operating. She was always operating. She took damage that should have required significant recovery time and returned from it in hours. Not fast healing. Not the twice the expected rate I had documented after the first Surrey. Hours. The other Veth soldiers never spoke to her directly. They acknowledged her. They followed her tactical guidance without question. Sometimes with what looked very much like reverence. But they did not eat with her. They did not sit with her on rest cycles. They kept a distance that had the shape of deliberate practice. Not avoidance, but a maintained space, like the gap people leave around something they do not fully understand how to approach. I started asking quiet questions, not to command, not to anyone who would report back. Just to the other long-serving humans on the station, the ones who had been in the field long enough to know things that weren't in any official briefing. A warrant officer named Denise, who had been running intelligence support for 2 coalition cycles, told me, "There are things in the VETH program that aren't in any database we have access to. Things Command doesn't brief about. I'd let it go, Morrow." "Why?" I asked. She looked at me for a long moment. "Because the people who asked too loudly are not here anymore," she said. "Not dead. Just reassigned. Far away, quietly." I thanked her and let it go. On the outside, I filed it next to everything else I had been filing. And I thought about the mask, and about the 2 VETH soldiers who had carried Ieva in on that first stretcher, and would not look at what they were carrying. And I thought about the hesitation when I had asked if she was breathing through it. And I thought about what she had said that first afternoon when she woke up. "I have heard things about humans, about the way they behave in medical contexts. Not I have been told. I have heard." As if she had been listening for a long time. As if she had been paying attention to us specifically for a reason, before we had ever met. I kept working. I kept saving people. I kept covering her back the way she covered mine, and I kept filing things. And I kept waiting. I did not yet know what I was waiting for. But the question that had started on that first afternoon, when she had asked me why, I bothered and I had realized no one had ever asked me that before, had not gone away. It had gotten quieter, more patient, more sure of itself. It was waiting too. The relay station on Cinder 7 was supposed to be a clean extraction. It was not clean. We went in as a 4-person team. Myself, Ieva, and 2 Drell fighters named Orith and Ven, who were excellent soldiers and had the particular quality that all excellent soldiers share. They did exactly what they were asked to do and did not add unnecessary commentary to difficult situations. The extraction target was a data core containing 2 years of Sketh communication intercepts. Command wanted it badly enough to send a human medic with a scout unit, which should have told me something about how confident they were in the operation remaining low risk. It did not tell me enough. The Sketh were already there when we arrived. Not in position, not ambushing us, not waiting, just there. Moving through the station in a pattern that was not a sweep and not a patrol, something else. Something purposeful and unhurried that was harder to predict than either. Ieva got us through the first 3 corridors clean. Her acoustic mapping of the Sketh positions was precise enough that we avoided contact entirely, which saved our timeline and, more importantly, saved our lives. We reached the data core room at the 9-minute mark, which was inside the window. Then the charges that the Sketh had placed in the station's support column detonated. The blast took out the bridge deck, connecting our exit route. The floor beneath us dropped 3 degrees to starboard as the structural compensation system struggled to account for the lost support. Orith went down with a broken leg, a bad one, the kind of break where I can see the outcome clearly the moment I look at it and start running. Calculations on how to get him mobile enough to move. Ven pulled him upright and held him there, which is exactly what you want a Drell soldier to do in that situation. I was already moving to Orith when the second detonation hit, smaller, further away, but in exactly the right place to collapse the secondary access shaft we had come through. We had one way out, the maintenance shaft on the north face of the deck, which led up 4 levels to the emergency hull exit, which led to the station exterior, which led to a very cold, very airless stretch of space we had no suits for. I said this out loud, not in panic, just as information. The way you say things when you are trying to think clearly and hearing your own voice helps. Ieva said, "There is a pressurized crawlway between maintenance level 2 and the external service dock." The Sketh did not include it in their demolition pattern. It was not on the station's official schematics. They would not have known about it. I looked at her. "How do you know about it?" "I mapped this station before we came in," she said. "It wasn't in the briefing files." "No," she said. "It wasn't." I looked at her for exactly 2 seconds. Then I said, "Lead the way." She did. I worked on Orith's leg as we moved, stabilizing, bracing, giving him something that would hold for the transit even if it was not a solution. He moved well for someone with a compound fracture. Drell have a higher pain tolerance than anything I have encountered in 11 years. Which is one of the many reasons they make excellent heavy fighters and deeply unnerving patients. We were 3/4 of the way through the maintenance tunnels when the Sketh scout unit found us. 3 of them. Fast, and quiet in a way their larger units are not. They came through a side access point that Ieva had not mapped, not because she had missed it, I realized later, but because it had been cut into the station wall sometime in the last 48 hours. Someone had made this access point specifically for this sweep. Ven engaged them immediately and held 2 of them. The third came past him, Fast and low, and it came for me. I have been in combat. 11 years means I have been in more situations than I can catalog. But I am a medic, not a fighter, and when something comes for me fast and low in a tight space, my options are limited. Ava stepped between us. What happened next took approximately 4 seconds, and I could not reconstruct it in any detail I was confident about. Even immediately afterward, she moved with the same quality she moved with in corridors, that relaxed certainty, that sense of reading a text she had read before. The Sketh Scout was not small and not slow. She was smaller and she was not slower. When it was over, she was standing unhurt, and the Sketh Scout was not a problem anymore. I looked at her. She was breathing evenly. Her hands were completely steady. "Are you all right?" I asked. "Yes," she said. "Thank you," I said. She looked at me through the dark lenses for a moment. Then she turned and continued toward the crawlway. I followed. We reached the service dock. We found a Veth emergency shuttle that had been docked there, and forgotten about for what the dust suggested was several years. The airlock opened on Ava's command. Not a code, not a key. Her command. She stood in front of the panel and it opened for her like it knew her, like it had been waiting. I noticed. I did not say anything. We got Orith and Ven aboard. Ava ran the launch sequence from memory. We cleared the station with 40 seconds to spare before the third and largest detonation brought the north face of the structure down into itself. On the shuttle, in the strange quiet of deep space transit, I sat beside Orith and monitored his leg and did not look at Ava in the pilot seat up front. But I thought about the panel that had opened for her command. I thought about the crawlway that wasn't on any schematic. I thought about 4 seconds in a maintenance tunnel that I could not reconstruct clearly. I thought about what she had said to me 8 days into our partnership, when I had told her I was the kind of person who looked for things that were working rather than things that were wrong. She had said that is an unusual way to practice medicine, and I had missed what was underneath that sentence. Or rather, I had heard it and not yet let myself follow it to its end. She was not just noting that I was unusual. She was telling me that she had been watching me, that she had been assessing me against some standard I did not know about, that she was trying to decide something about me that mattered. I sat beside Orith in the quiet of the shuttle and looked at the back of her head, and I thought about the mask, about the mourning rite that was not a mourning rite, about the Veth officer who had said she was important to people who were more important than me, about Denise, who had said the people who asked too loudly were quietly moved somewhere very far away. I was going to ask, I had already decided. I did not yet know how or when or what I would do with the answer, but I was going to ask, because she had covered my back in that tunnel without hesitation, without calculation, without a single second spent deciding, and I owed her the same kind of honesty, whatever the answer cost me. Orith's surgery took 2 hours and came out cleanly. He would keep the leg. He told me, while coming out of the anesthetic, that the Drell equivalent of thanks was a nod so small most species missed it. I told him I had noticed. He looked mildly pleased about that and then went back to sleep. I was writing up the surgical notes when Ava came and stood in the doorway of the recovery bay. "You should sleep," she said. "I will," I said. "You have been saying that since 0400, she said. I set down my writing tool and looked at her. "You have been tracking what I have been saying since 0400? A pause. "I track things," she said. "It is what I do." "I know," I said. "I have been watching you track things for weeks." She was very still in the doorway. The kind of stillness that is not calm. It is the stillness of something that has stopped in place, because the path ahead has just changed in a way it was not prepared for. I did not push. I went back to my notes. After a moment, she came into the room and sat down in the chair on the other side of Orith's cot. Not beside me, just present in the same space. She did not speak. Neither did I. We sat with the sleeping Drell soldier between us and the station hum around us and the gas giant somewhere far below. And I thought about the question I was going to ask. Not tonight, not yet. I wanted to know her better before I asked. I wanted her to know me better. I wanted whatever answer she gave me to land somewhere soft enough to hold it. But the question was there, patient and quiet and completely sure of itself. Why do you always wear the mask? And underneath it, the one I could not yet put into words. Who are you really, Ava? And why, of all the people on this station, on this front, in this war, why did you keep covering my back? I did not know then that she was asking herself the same question in reverse. I did not know how long she had been asking it. I did not know that the answer was going to change everything. For both of us, for the other Wovens scattered across the front, for the coalition law that held their lives in a category that was not quite alive. I only knew what I had known since the first afternoon, since the dark lenses had turned toward me on the cot in the triage bay and asked me why I bothered. I was going to find out. And I was not going to stop until I did. The ambush did not announce itself. They never do. We had been on the Cinder 7 relay run for 16 days, rotating between station security and field extractions, when Command assigned our unit to a long-range sweep of the secondary corridor network, connecting the old mining stations to the Coalition's forward supply hub routine, they said. Light Sketh presence, they said. 2-unit sweep in and out within a standard shift. I have been in this war long enough to know that when Command says routine, they mean they do not have complete information. There were 7 of us. Myself, Ava, 2 Veth soldiers named Yara and Sesson, and 3 humans, a scout corporal named Owen, a comms specialist named Nadine, and a demolitions tech named Pete, who had been in the field so long that he referred to everything dangerous by affectionate nicknames, which I found simultaneously comforting and deeply unsettling. We moved through the first 4 stations without contact. The 5th station was dark. No power, no environmental systems, the air cold enough that our breath came out as white clouds in the beams of our helmet lights. Ava moved through it like it was daylit. I stayed behind her left shoulder and watched the way she processed the space, the small tilts of her head, the pauses at certain points that corresponded, I had learned, to her reading acoustic data off the structure around us. Halfway through the station she stopped. We all stopped. She stood completely still for about 4 seconds. Then she said very quietly, 20. Approximately. Upper deck and the access corridor behind us. They came in through a maintenance shaft that isn't on the station map. Nobody moved. Options? I said. 1, she said. The bridge deck. It connects to a maintenance shaft on the north face that leads to the exterior loading dock. The structural integrity of the bridge deck is compromised. The deck plating has partial collapse on the eastern side. If we move fast and stay to the western edge, it will hold. You've been here before? Owen asked. No, she said. Nobody asked how she knew. We had all been working with Ava long enough to have stopped asking. You follow the guidance or you don't. And the people who had followed it were still functional. And the people who hadn't were a different statistic entirely. We moved. We almost made it. The Sketh unit on the upper deck was faster than Ava's estimate. Not by much, but enough. They came over the upper railing as we crossed the bridge deck. And the firefight that started was the kind that happens in tight spaces with bad angles and not enough room to do anything elegantly. Owen and Nadine held the western approach. Yara and Sesson took the eastern railing. Pete, with the cheerful efficiency he brought to everything, handled a side corridor in a way that produced a noise that meant we would not need to worry about that corridor anymore. I was pulling Sesson's back from the railing, a hit to the shoulder. Not fatal, but bleeding in a way that required immediate attention. When the eastern section of the bridge deck gave way, not all of it. The section directly under me, I fell. Not far, 8 feet, maybe 10, into the subdeck below the bridge level. Far enough that the impact was solid, and the pain that went through my midsection was immediate and total. I lay on the subdeck floor and ran a quick internal inventory, breathing, yes, moving, partially. The specific quality of pain on my left side was the kind that meant something had been wrong about that landing. Above me, through the hole in the deck plating, the firefight continued. I heard Ava say my name, just once, flat and clear, with no inflection that I could interpret. A question and a statement at the same time. I'm here, I called up. I'm functional, keep going. A pause. Then Yara, take the western approach, I'm going to the subdeck, Yara said. The bridge is still, I know, Ava said. She dropped through the hole in the deck plating and landed beside me in one smooth motion. Exactly the way someone lands when they are not guessing at the distance. I looked up at her from the floor. I told you I was functional. You told me you were functional, she said. I wanted to verify. She knelt beside me in her hands, steady, precise. The way everything about her was steady and precise. We're already assessing the damage on my left side. 2 ribs, possibly 3. Bruising consistent with a suboptimal landing impact. No internal compromise that I can detect through surface assessment. Your surface assessment is better than most diagnostic readers, I said. She did not answer. She was doing something with the pressure dressing from my own kit. She had taken it without asking, which was fine. I would have offered it. And the speed and accuracy of her work was the thing I always came back to, every time, the thing I had been filing away since the first week, the thing that did not fit the expected pattern. Ava, I said. Stay still, she said. Ava. I waited until the dark lenses came up and met me. How are you doing this? All of it, I said. The acoustic mapping. The knowing where things are before we get there. The speed. The pressure dressing that you are applying with the exact technique from the Coalition, medic manual that I know for a fact takes humans 6 months to learn. I watched her hand stop, very briefly, over the dressing. You are not just a Veth scout, I said. I have been watching you for weeks, and you are not just a Veth scout. I am not asking because I want to report it. I am asking because I trust you and I would like to understand who I trust. The station shook. Above us, something significant happened, and then the firefight sounds began to diminish, which meant either that our side had won, or that there was no longer anyone above us to fight, and I chose to believe the first option. Ava's hands were still on the dressing. She had not moved. She was looking at me through the lenses, and I could not read what was behind them. I had never fully been able to read it, but right now it felt different. It felt like standing at a door and hearing something on the other side that has not decided yet whether to open. Then she said, "If I tell you it changes things." "What things?" I asked. "The things that keep you safe," she said. "Right now, you are a human medic who does not know classified information. That is a protected position. If you know what I am, you become a liability to the people who want the information controlled. You become something they would rather move or silence than risk." She paused. "I have watched you save every person you could reach for 16 days. I do not want to be the reason someone decides you need to be handled." I was quiet for a moment. The station had gone still above us. I could hear Nadine calling the all clear through the comms. "So you have been protecting me," I said. "This whole time. The mask, all of it. You have been protecting me." "Yes," she said, "by hiding, yes." "And you made that decision for me," I said, without asking. A long pause. "Yes," she said, very quietly. I lay on the cold floor of the subdeck with 2 cracked ribs and a pressure dressing, and looked up at the person who had been covering my back every day for 16 days, and I thought about what it meant to protect someone by hiding from them, and about what it cost. "Tell me," I said. "Kale, tell me," I said again. Not hard, not demanding, just steady. "Whatever it costs, tell me. I would rather know and carry it than have you carry it alone to keep me clear of it." The lenses held on me. Then she reached up, and for the first time since I had known her, she removed the mask. I had imagined vaguely what I might find underneath it. Something damaged, maybe, scarring that she did not want seen, a wound that had never properly healed. I had not imagined the right thing. Her face was she was. She was partly what I had expected. Veth features, clean and well-structured, with the particular bone density around the jaw that is characteristic of Veth females. Brown skin, one eye dark brown, steady, looking at me with an expression I recognized immediately and had not expected to recognize. Afraid. The other side of her face was different. Bioluminescent filaments, thin as wire and faintly blue-white, ran beneath the skin of her left cheekbone and into the corner of her left eye, which was not an eye in the biological sense. It was a lens multi-layered, built for resolution and range and light spectrum processing that no organic eye could match. Around the filaments, the skin was smooth and seamless, not augmented over but grown that way, as if the organic and the constructed had been woven together at the cellular level. She was both things at once, a Veth soldier and something built, not a machine wearing a face, not a person wearing a machine. Something that had become one thing from two, a woven, though I did not yet have that word. I looked at her for a long time. She did not look away. "Okay," I said. She blinked. The organic eye. The constructed one adjusted its focus with a precision I could track if I looked closely. "Okay," she said. "You should have told me sooner," I said. "Not because of what it means for me. Because you have been carrying this alone and that is not." I stopped. "That is not what partners are for." She looked at me with the expression I had recognized, afraid. But it was shifting into something else now. Something that did not have a name in Veth language, I suspected, but that I recognized from 11 years of sitting beside cots in the dark. Relief. "Tell me the rest," I said. "All of it. I am going to lie here for a few more minutes because my ribs would like me to, and you are going to tell me everything." She told me. The Wovens were a classified Veth military project, a program that had been running for 30 years, producing soldiers who were part organic, part constructed, who could process the battlefield in ways that purely biological soldiers could not, who could operate in conditions that would end an organic life, who were faster and more resilient and more capable in every measurable category. There were 12 of them. Ava was the eldest, the first successful integration, the one the program had been built to prove possible. Under coalition law, they had no personhood status. They were classified as military assets, more complex than standard equipment, but not materially different in legal standing. They could be deactivated at command discretion, without consent, without process. They could be assigned to expendable primary designations, the first to be sacrificed in a tactical retreat, without any consultation or right of objection. They had been wearing masks in the field because command had decided that if the other coalition species knew what the Veth had built, The political consequences would be significant. The mask was not a morning rite. It had never been a morning rite. It was a containment strategy. Ava had been wearing it to protect herself, yes. But more than that, she had been wearing it to protect the people who knew her, who worked with her, who might be classified as security risks if command decided they had learned too much. She had been wearing it to protect me. She looked at me steadily while she said this, like she was not sure what I was going to do with it. I said, "The other 11, are they in the field right now?" 10 of them, she said. 2 are on rotation at the forward hub. Do they have people looking out for them? They have units, she said carefully. Humans and others who work with them, who have noticed things. Have any of them been told the truth? No, she said. I nodded slowly. My ribs were suggesting firmly that I stay exactly where I was. I stayed exactly where I was, hey? I said again. You keep saying that, she said. Because it keeps being true, I said. Help me up. We need to rejoin the others. And then, when we are back on station and Sesson's shoulder has been dealt with, I would like to have a longer conversation. About what? She asked. About the fact, I said, that 11 people in this war have no one in their corner who knows enough to be in their corner. And about whether we can do something about that. She looked at me through one brown eye and one constructed lens, both of them fixed on my face with the same quality of attention she brought to everything. Complete, precise, genuine. You are going to try to fix this, she said. Not a question. I am going to try, I said. It will not be easy, she said. No, I said. But you said the people who asked too loudly got moved somewhere quiet. Nobody said anything about the people who asked in writing, with documentation through 12 different coalition legal channels simultaneously. A pause. Then that is a very human plan. Yes, I said. She helped me up. Above us, Nadine was calling down through the hole in the deck plating, asking if we were functional. I called back that we were. Owen's voice came through after, asking if we needed a rope, and Pete's voice came after that, asking if anyone had seen his secondary detonator, which, he added, was fine, he had found it. Ava handed me my medkit. I slung it over my shoulder. She was looking at me with the expression I still did not have a complete name for. The one that was relief and something underneath relief and something underneath that which was older and quieter and had been waiting a very long time. Kale, she said. Yeah? Thank you, she said, for not looking at me differently. I thought about that for a moment. I looked at you the same way I always look at patients, I said. I was checking to see if everything was working. She stood very still. It is, I said. Everything is working. Then I reached up, took the hand she had used to help me up, and gave it a single short squeeze before letting it go. She let me. We went back up to the others. The order came on a Tuesday. I was in the secondary med bay, doing post-rotation inventory on the surgical kit, when the notification came through on my comm unit. Not a direct communication, a classified transfer notice, routed through the administrative system, with a Coalition High Command authorization code at the header. I read it twice to make sure I had understood it correctly. AVA, Asset Designation W1, was to be placed under secured custody pending a security review initiated by the discovery of unauthorized information disclosure regarding classified program woven. As the recipient of the disclosure, Sergeant Cale Morrow was to report to command immediately to receive terms of the associated liability waiver. I sat with the notification on my comm unit for a long time. Then I set down the surgical kit very carefully and walked to command. The officer waiting me was a coalition liaison named Colonel Seven, a Veth senior, with the kind of controlled stillness that told me he was handling this personally, because the usual channels could not be trusted to handle it the way he wanted it handled. He sat across a bare table in a small briefing room and he did not offer me a seat, and I sat down anyway. He told me the situation plainly, because Veth are plain when they decide plain is the most efficient approach. Ava had disclosed classified program information to an unauthorized recipient, me. The disclosure was a security violation. The protocol for security violations of this level was deactivation of the asset. The protocol for human personnel who had received the information was reassignment to a non-operational posting and ongoing monitoring. However, he said, because my service record was exceptional, and because my knowledge was limited to one asset rather than the full program, Command was prepared to offer an alternative arrangement. I would sign an authorization form confirming that the disclosure had been non-consensual, and that I had retained no actionable understanding of the information. Ava would be deactivated under standard protocol. I would receive a formal citation, a promotion, and early discharge with full benefits. The matter would be closed. He slid the authorization form across the table. I looked at it. I thought about Ava on the subdeck floor, removing the mask for the first time, afraid. About the one brown eye looking at me. About you would stop saving me. I thought about 11 people in this war with no one in their corner. I thought about the thing Denise had told me. The people who asked too loudly got moved somewhere quiet. I slid the form back across the table. No. ISIS 7 looked at the form, then at me. Sergeant Morrow, I want you to understand the full scope of— I understand the full scope, I said. I am not signing it. If you decline, he said carefully, you will be placed in administrative detention pending further review. You will be classified as a security risk. Your field posting will be suspended. Your discharge eligibility will be revoked. I understand, I said. And the asset will be deactivated regardless, he said. Your refusal does not prevent the deactivation. It only adds consequences to your own situation. I looked at him for a moment. Colonel 7, I said, I have been in this war for 11 years. I am a human medic. I have been told that certain casualties are non-survivable more times than I can count. I have never once found that classification convincing. I stood up. I am going to need a pen and paper, please. I have some correspondence to write. He stared at me. I waited. He did not provide the pen and paper, so I went back to the med bay and used my own. I sat down at the small desk in the corner of the bay and I wrote. Not one letter, not one complaint. I wrote to every human officer above my rank that I had served with, worked beside, or treated in 11 years of field medicine. I wrote to the Human Diplomatic Delegation's legal counsel, whose contact information I had kept in my personal files since a conversation 3 years ago on a ship that no longer existed. I wrote to a war correspondent named Clara, who had sharp eyes and a sharper pen and who owed me, in the informal economy of the field, considerably more than she had yet repaid. I wrote to each of them separately, with specific information, specific names, specific legal citations from both the Coalition Accord on Sentient Asset Rights, a document that was rarely applied and never applied to wovens, but which existed, and from the human legal precedent on personhood that had been settled, painfully and expensively, in the civil conflicts of the 22nd century. I wrote clearly and I wrote without drama, because drama is easy to dismiss and clear legal argument is considerably harder. Then I sent all of it, and then I went to find Ava. She was not in her quarters. She was not in the operational briefing room. I found her at the secured custody station on Deck 3, where 2 Veth security officers had been stationed outside a locked room, and were looking at the floor with the studied neutrality of soldiers who had been given an assignment they found uncomfortable, but were too professional to object to. I stood in front of the door. I would like to speak with her. The first security officer said, This station has been placed under. I am her assigned medical officer, I said. Patients under secured custody retain medical access rights under Coalition Health Protocol. Section 12, Paragraph 4. I would like to speak with her. The 2 officers looked at each other. Coalition Health Protocol, Section 12, Paragraph 4 does exist. I had looked it up approximately 40 minutes ago. They could not immediately cite a counter provision because there is not one. The door opened. Ava was sitting on the floor with her back against the wall. She was not wearing the mask. She had not worn it since the subdeck, and she was not going to wear it again. She looked up at me when I came in. She looked tired in a way I had not seen before. Not physically tired. She did not get physically tired, but something underneath that. Tired in the way of someone who has been expecting something bad for a long time and has just received confirmation that it is on its way. I sat down on the floor across from her. You sent correspondence, she said. You tracked the outgoing comms. I track things, she said. I know, I said. She looked at her hands which were resting on her knees. The filaments in her cheek were dim. Not entirely dark, but low, the way a light goes when the power feeding it is diverted to other things. It will not work, she said. The Coalition Command has full authority over program assets. There is no legal mechanism that overrides. The Coalition Accord on Sentient Asset Rights, I said, applies to any entity capable of independent decision-making, relational attachment, and self-preservation instinct. You have all 3. Every woven has all 3. That is not my interpretation. That is the direct language of the document. I watched her look up. The document was never applied to wovens because no one who knew about wovens had ever cited it, until now. She looked at me for a long time. The correspondence I sent to the Human Diplomatic Delegation's legal counsel, I continued, included a full accounting of the program, the current deactivation order, and a request for emergency intervention under the Accord. I also sent an account to Clara Webb, who is a correspondent with coalition-wide press access, because public information is harder to bury than private legal filings. I paused, and I sent a message to Owen and Pete and Nadine, because they are good people and they are going to be angry when they find out. and I would rather they find out from me so their anger is pointed in a useful direction. Ava's expression was doing something I had not seen it do before. It was moving between things too quickly for me to name each one. Disbelief, and something underneath it, and something underneath that. Kale, she said. I know it may not work, I said. I want to be honest with you about that. The Coalition Command has real authority and real power, and I am a sergeant with cracked ribs and 11 years of field experience. Those are not equivalent forces. I met her eyes, both of them, but I have been in this work long enough to know that non-survivable is a classification, not a fact, and I am not going to accept this classification. She was quiet for a long time. The filaments brightened slowly, not dramatically, just enough. You are going to get reassigned, she said. Or worse, possibly, I said. You are risking your career, your record, your— Yes, I said. For something that may not. Ava. I waited until she stopped. Do you remember what you said to me? The first time I asked you about the mask. A pause. Because you'd stop saving me, she said softly. You thought that knowing the truth about you would change the way I saw you, I said. You thought it would make me calculate, make me assess, make me weigh whether you were worth the effort. I shook my head. I didn't, and I'm not going to start now. She looked at me with the one brown eye and the one constructed lens, and both of them were doing the same thing, holding on to me like I was something that might disappear. There are 11 others, she said. You know that. If this works, then it works for all of them, I said. That was always the point. The station hummed around us. Somewhere above, I could hear footsteps in the corridor. Multiple sets, moving with the kind of urgency that meant my correspondence had begun to land somewhere. Good. I needed it to land fast. What do we do now, she asked. Now, I said, we wait. And we let the humans do what humans do, which is, she asked. Be inconveniently persistent, I said, and I sat back against the wall beside her. Because if she was going to be in this room, then I was going to be in this room, and I was not going to move until someone made me. And the someone who made me was going to have to produce a legal counter-citation that did not exist, and I was very comfortable being patient about that. The filaments in her cheek were bright now, faintly gold, the way they had gone when she laughed on the subdeck. She was not laughing now, but they were bright, I noticed. I did not say anything. I just stayed. The first response came from the human diplomatic delegation at 0340 on Wednesday morning. I was still in the secured custody room. The security officers had given up trying to enforce my departure after the 4th hour and had begun taking turns going for meals, which I took as a sign that the institutional pressure was beginning to shift. Ava was telling me about the third woven, a male named Saren who was currently stationed on the forward hub 3 sectors away, when my comm unit produced the notification sound that meant a classified diplomatic transmission. I read it twice. Then I handed the unit to Ava. The delegation had filed an emergency citation under the Coalition Accord on Sentient Asset Rights. The filing named all 12 wovens by their program designations and requested immediate suspension of any deactivation or disposal orders pending a full legal review. Under Coalition Emergency Provision 3, a filed citation from a member species delegation automatically suspended executive action on named assets for a period of 72 hours. Ava held the comm unit for a long time. She read it once, then again. Then she set it down carefully on the floor beside her. 72 hours, she said. It is a start, I said. It is not a resolution, she said. No, I said. But it is 72 hours in which no one can touch you or any of the others, and in which Clara Webb's account of the program will have reached every news distribution channel in Coalition space, and in which my correspondence to every human officer I have ever served with will have been read, forwarded, and discussed in briefing rooms I will never see. I paused. And in which 3 other species in the Coalition will have had 72 hours to decide whether they agree that the VETH program violates the accord they all signed. Ava looked at the comm unit, then at me. You planned this. I planned a direction, I said. The details are being handled by people who are better at their jobs than I am at mine, which is the right way to run any operation. She said nothing for a moment. Then, the VETH public does not know we exist. They do now, I said. Clara Webb is very good at her job. The silence that followed was not the silence of nothing happening. It was the silence of a great many things happening at once, very far away, in rooms and on ships and in the feeds of coalition-wide communications networks, and the sound of them not yet reaching us. The kind of silence that comes just before something large and inevitable arrives. I had been in this war for 11 years. I knew what that silence felt like. It felt like holding. At 0900, the second response arrived. This one came from the Orith Representative Council, who had reviewed the Accord citation and issued a supporting statement. At 1100, The Soon Logistics Directorate filed a formal inquiry into the program's compliance with coalition partnership agreements. At 1400, a Drell combat unit, the same formation that Orath and Venn served with, submitted a collective personnel statement to Coalition High Command, stating that they considered any Woven serving in active field operations to be a fellow soldier under the Coalition Mutual Protection Clauses. Orath's name was at the top of the list. He had signed it while still in recovery from his leg surgery. I found out later that Pete had carried the statement to him. Pete had also added his own name to the bottom, and under his name, in careful handwriting, he had written, "Also Venn asked me to add his name. He says he would have written it himself, but he was busy." I read that and sat with it for a moment. At 1600, Colonel Seven came to the secured custody room. He did not look like a man who was angry, because VETH senior officers do not look like men who are angry. He looked like a man who had made a calculation and found that the numbers were no longer what they had been that morning. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he looked at Ava. Then he said, "The deactivation order is suspended pending coalition review. Asset Vivo 1 and associated program assets will be transferred to open custody during the review period. Sergeant Morrow, your administrative detention is lifted. You are returned to full-duty status pending review of your conduct." He left without saying anything else. Ava looked at the door for a long time after it closed. "It is not finished," she said. "No," I said. "It is not. The review will take time and the legal path is not clear, and there will be people who push back hard." I stood, because my back had decided it was done with the floor regardless of what the situation required. But the direction has changed. That is what 72 hours buys you. It changes the direction. Everything after that is about holding the new direction long enough for it to become permanent. She stood too. She was not wearing the mask. She had not worn it in 3 days, and she was not going to wear it again. Her face was entirely visible. The VETH features and the filaments and the constructed lens and the one brown eye that had been afraid and was something else now. "What are you going to do?" she asked. "Talk to Owen and Nadine and Pete," I said. "Start researching the legal path for the other 11, because each of their situations is different, and the Accord citation will need supporting documentation specific to each one." I picked up my medkit from the corner where I had left it 3 days ago, and eat something. I have not eaten since yesterday morning. "Kale," she said. I turned. She was looking at me with the expression I had been accumulating a name for. Slowly, piece by piece. The way you learn a language by hearing it spoken before you see it written. It was the expression of someone who had built a wall for a very long time, because the wall was what kept them standing, and who had just watched someone dismantle it brick by brick, not with force, but with the quiet persistence of a person who found the wall unnecessary. "Why?" she said. "Not what or how. Why?" I thought about it. The real answer. The one underneath all the legal citations and the correspondence and the 72 hours of holding. "Because you were worth saving," I said. "You were always worth saving. You knew it and you spent a long time waiting for someone else to know it too." I shrugged. "Now they know. Now we make it stick." She did not say anything. The filaments were gold. I went to find food, and she walked beside me, mask on, face entirely open to whatever the station had to offer, and neither of us said anything for a while. We did not need to. The Coalition Special Review Tribunal convened 14 days after the emergency citation was filed, which was, by coalition standards, extraordinarily fast. Ordinarily, a review of this complexity, touching on program classification, species partnership obligations, military asset law, and the direct application of the Accord, would have been scheduled for 3 months out, assigned to a subcommittee, and processed through 5 layers of interdepartmental coordination before anyone who could make a decision to see it to. The speed, I was told by the delegation's legal counsel, a careful, precise woman named Harriet, who had the kind of voice that made legal terminology sound like common sense, was a direct consequence of the public attention. Clara Webb had published her account 48 hours after receiving my message. Not a leak, a full investigation, backed by the testimony of 3 human personnel who had served alongside Wovens and were prepared to go on record, and by the supporting statements from Orath and Soon and the Drell Combat Unit, and by the Accord citation itself. Coalition-wide public knowledge of the Woven program had gone from 0 to complete in the space of 2 days. And the VETH government, facing a public that was discovering it had been kept entirely in the dark about a 30-year classified program producing soldiers without legal rights, had found itself in a position that required it to be seen doing the right thing very quickly. Harriet explained all of this to me and Iva in a small briefing room the morning before the tribunal, with the calm efficiency of someone who has navigated difficult legal terrain enough times to find it merely interesting rather than alarming. The legal argument is sound, she said. The Accord language is clear and the wovens meet every criterion for coverage. The primary challenge is the precedent question. Command will argue that extending coverage retroactively destabilizes existing military asset classifications across all species, not just VETH. We need to be ready for that. Is that argument valid? I asked. Technically, yes, she said. Practically, no. The destabilization they are worried about would require other species to also have classified programs producing sentient military assets without legal rights, which, she paused very briefly, turns out to be a concern shared by more than one coalition member, Ava said. Harriet looked at her. Among others, which is why the Orith supporting statement was very carefully worded. A small pause. It is also why you now have more allies in that room than you did 2 weeks ago. I looked at Ava. She was looking at Harriet with the focused attention she brought to new information. Processing it, placing it, finding where it fit in the pattern she was always building. What do you need from us? Ava asked. Kale's testimony about the field disclosures and the subsequent command response, Harriet said. And your testimony about the program itself. What you experienced, what you understood about your legal status. What the cost of that status was to you personally. She met Ava's eyes, both of them, if you are willing to give it. Ava was quiet for a moment. I did not say anything. This was her choice, and I was not going to make it for her. Yes, she said, I am willing. The tribunal chamber held 42 representatives from across the coalition, which sounds manageable until you are actually standing in it, and facing 42 species in various configurations of species-appropriate formal dress. All of them looking at you with the particular intensity of people who have made a decision about the importance of what is happening and are paying full attention accordingly. I testified first. I said what I knew, the field operations, the disclosure, the command response, the deactivation order. I cited the sections of the Accord. I was clear and I did not dramatize it because the facts did not require drama. When the VETH command representative challenged my characterization of the deactivation order as punitive, I cited the timeline of events and the exact language of the authorization form, and let the tribunal draw its own conclusions. They drew the conclusions that the timeline and the language supported. Then Iva testified. She stood in the center of the chamber and she told the tribunal what she was. Not with self-pity, not with anger. In the same precise, clear way she did everything. She described the program. She described what it meant to have no legal status. She described the mask, what it was for, what it cost to wear it, what it had felt like to move through 11 years of a war in which she had no right to object to being used as a first-loss asset. She described the moment on the subdeck. She did not describe it the way I would have described it. She described it the way a woven scout describes a significant tactical event, with complete accuracy, with attention to every relevant detail, with no omission of the parts that were difficult. She described removing the mask. She described what she had expected me to do. She described what I had done instead. She described what it had felt like, hearing someone say okay. The chamber was very quiet when she finished. The tribunal deliberated for 6 hours. I sat in a corridor outside the chamber with Harriet on one side and Owen on the other. Pete was there too, down the corridor, with his back against the wall and his eyes closed, either sleeping or thinking. With Pete it was difficult to tell. Nadine was pacing in a precise circuit that I suspected she was unaware of making. Orith, who had come from the forward hub, on a medical transport that his commander had authorized with unusual speed, was sitting very still in the way Drells sit when they are waiting, perfectly contained, completely ready, like a held breath. Ava was inside the chamber. She had been asked to remain as a witness resource during deliberations. I had been asked to leave, which I had done, and had then sat down in the corridor because I was not going anywhere. 6 hours. Then the doors opened. Harriet stood up. I stood up. Owen stood up beside me without a word, and Pete's eyes opened and Nadine stopped pacing. The lead tribunal officer, a senior, whose formal title translated to something like arbiter of complex obligations, stood in the doorway and read the determination in the flat, clear tones of someone who has been reading determinations for a long time and understands that the words carry their own weight without requiring performance. The woven satisfied all criteria for coverage under the Coalition Accord on Sentient Asset Rights. Effective immediately, all 12 wovens were granted provisional personhood status, pending completion of a full legal review to establish permanent standing within 60 days. All existing deactivation orders were voided. The expendable primary designation system, as applied to persons covered under the Accord, was suspended pending review of its compliance with coalition partnership law. The arbiter stopped reading. She looked up at the corridor. Eva was standing behind her in the doorway. She was looking at me. I had prepared in the back of my mind something I might say at this moment. Some useful and appropriate thing that acknowledged what had happened without overstating it or making it about me in a way that was not accurate. I did not say any of it. I just looked back at her. Owen made a sound that was partly a word and partly just relief made audible. And Pete said something short and heartfelt that was not entirely printable but expressed the situation accurately. And Nadine had stopped pacing and was standing completely still with her hands over her mouth. And Orith gave a nod so small that only someone watching for it would have caught it, which I did. Eva walked out of the doorway and down the corridor toward me. She stopped when she was close, in the way she always stopped. Close but not intrusive, at the distance she had always maintained until she decided not to. She said, "I have been trying to find the right words." "You do not have to find them right now," I said. "I have been trying for several hours," she said. In the chamber. While they were deliberating, she paused. "I kept coming back to what you said, on the subdeck, when I showed you what I was." "Okay," I said. "Yes," she said, "that." She was quiet for a moment. I think humans are very good at that word. At meaning everything that needs to be meant with something very small. I said, "We have had a lot of practice." The filaments in her cheek were gold. Steadily, evenly gold, like something that was no longer running low. She reached out and took my hand. Not to help me up, not because the situation required it, just took it, her fingers around mine warm and steady. The way she was warm and steady in everything she did. I did not say anything, neither did she. We stood in the corridor of Cinder Station, with Owen and Pete and Nadine and Orith around us. And somewhere in the chamber behind us, the tribunal was writing up its determination. And somewhere across the front 10 other Wovens were receiving the notification that was going to change their lives. And somewhere in the Coalition Communications Network, the ruling was moving outward at the speed of light toward every station and ship and outpost that had ever thought of a person as an asset to be used. The gas giant Imarak was not visible from this corridor, but I knew it was there, somewhere below us, turning in shades of amber and violet, slow and immense and indifferent. It was enough to know. That evening, long after the others had gone, I found the observation deck again. Eva was already there. She had known I would come. She always knew. We stood at the wide viewport and watched the planet turn, and I thought about 11 years of war, and about the triage classification that said non-survivable, and about a woman on a stretcher on the first night, wearing a white mask, asking me why I had bothered. She was not wearing the mask. She would not wear it again. She was standing beside me in the light of the gas giant, filaments faintly gold, one brown eye and one constructed lens both focused on the same infinite amber dark, and she was entirely herself, every part of her. The organic and the built, the Veth soldier and the constructed mind, and the person who had spent 11 years carrying a secret that was heavier than any wound I had ever dressed. "Kale," she said. "Yeah, I am glad you bothered," she said. I thought about the chair beside the cot, about the half-ration bar at 2 in the morning, about the 40 minutes I had spent on a non-survivable case because I did not find that classification convincing. "Me too," I said. The planet turned. The station hummed. Somewhere in the network, 60 days of legal process were beginning, and at the end of them 12 people who had never had standing in the law were going to have it. It was not everything. It was not the end of the war, or the end of injustice, or the end of the long list of things in the galaxy that needed fixing. It was one thing, one corner of one system, 12 people who could now object to being placed in the line that no one comes back from. But it was real, it was done, it held. I have been asked since that day what humanity's greatest contribution to the coalition was. I have been asked it by reporters and officers, and by other species who were trying to understand us, trying to put us in a category that made sense to them. I never say our weapons. I never say our medicine, though I am partial to it. I never say our stubbornness, though the stubbornness is real and I will defend it. I say this: we were the ones who kept asking, out loud, every single time, who gets to count. Not elegantly, not efficiently, not in a way that made tactical sense, or fit the resource projections, or served the clean strategic logic of the coalition's war aims, just asking every time. In the burning station and the collapsed corridor, and the small briefing room, and the tribunal chamber and the corridor outside it, waiting 6 hours in a plastic chair for a door to open, we asked, and we waited, and we did not leave. That is what we do. It is not rational. It is not calculated. It is simply what we are, the species that looks at the chair beside the cot and sits down in it, and stays there in the dark with the half-ration bar, and the hope that is not yet certainty, and waits for the person to still be there when the lights come back up.